Hey everyone, welcome. Beth Barany here. I am the host of How to Write the Future podcast, a writer, a teacher, creativity coach, and obviously podcaster. And I'm here to support writers to help you write stories that really help us change the paradigm so we can live better lives, more full lives. I believe that stories are so powerful, and when we vision and put that vision into our work, we help make it so, not just for ourselves, which is actually incredibly important, but also for our readers, which I think is just amazing and phenomenal. So the work we do here as storytellers is vital. It's vital for culture. And occasionally I bring guests onto this show. I am very excited to welcome in our guest today, Leon Conrad. Leon, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to read your bio so everyone can get to know you a little better. So everyone, Leon Conrad grew up among the souks and bazaars of Egypt. Early encounters with storytelling from a living Arabian Nights type oral tradition started him on a lifelong quest to explore the unique power the human voice has to inspire. A talented pianist and linguist, he studied music in London, UK, working with opera singers and musical theater performers. He studied storytelling with Chanale Cumbers, I hope I have that right, a Jewish storyteller from a living oral tradition. As an author, his groundbreaking book, Story and Structure, A Complete Guide, has won several literary awards, including the IPN Nonfiction Book of the Year, and was shortlisted for the People's Book Prize. Leon set up the Unknown Storyteller Project in 2018 to help writers use story structure techniques to craft tighter stories and to spot and fix plot holes more effectively. As a tutor, he works with gifted and talented students ages 7 and up, helping many to publish their work independently and traditionally. He runs courses for writers of all ages. And by the end of this episode, I will tell you, or Leon will tell you, how you can learn more about his work. Leon, welcome again. So excited to have you here.
Thank you, Beth. It's lovely to talk to you. Lovely to chat to you and other writers vicariously about a genre I love myself. I love reading science fiction and fantasy, and often enjoy working with writers in those genres, as well as other genres.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I am a science fiction and fantasy novelist, and I cater specifically to science fiction and fantasy novelists, since it's the genre I know the best. And of course, all are welcome here. I have romance in my work. My husband, who co-teaches with me, he brings in thriller, suspense. I'm actually writing a science fiction mystery series, so I have a lot of knowledge also about mystery. And I love it when people bring different kinds of stories together, like I have, like science fiction mystery / adventure, that kind of thing. So I have studied story structure a ton, and I was really excited when you reached out to be on the show because you have such a vast knowledge about story structure, and I would love to hear more about that and more about how specifically can we take your understanding of story structure and how it can inform those of us who are working on our science fiction and fantasy stories.
Of course, the most important thing I can say starting off is the approach I use to story structure is grounded in an oral tradition. And the methodology works for people who like to structure and plan ahead of time about what they're going to do, or people who are more intuitive and take the typical pantser approach, because it's grounded on a very simple principle. Story, well told, well crafted, well structured, will have a pattern of ebb and flow. The ebb is where the tension builds up, and the flow is where it releases. Every story will have those elements in it. The number of times a story ebbs and flows and why a story ebbs and flows is what gives rise to different story structures.
Yes, that makes sense. And to me, it's very akin to breathing, walking, the heartbeat. So I ground myself as a writer very much in the kinesthetic and in the body elements. And I love how simply you put that. It's an ebb and it's a flow. And so the difference is you're saying, so let's take fantasy, since a lot of people have strong ideas about fantasy. And maybe a lot of our listeners grew up on fairy tales and folk tales like I did. You also are very much rooted in an oral storytelling tradition. And all the fairy tales and folk tales that our parents may have read to us or invented. My father would invent stories and just tell us stories. My father, he actually would read from the Arabian Nights to us. All of that, all based in the oral storytelling tradition. So can you get some more specifics in there and apply it to those of us who are working on fantasy? Give us some more details on this.
Sure. Well, for me, story happens across many genres. You've mentioned some of the most popular, but in my book, Story and Structure, I show that the story of the Three Little Pigs, the well-known version of it, and the structure of a typical academic essay or a mathematical proof share exactly the same story structure. And I call it the quest structure. In my book, I use 6 very simple, visually intuitive symbols to map a story structure. I talked about 2 of those main aspects, the ebb and the flow, the pull, the push, and I use a backward and a forward barb to symbolize them respectively. Take the story of the Three Little Pigs. We take the pigs of the character, and I map story structures to individual characters. That's very important. Whatever genre you're writing in, you will probably focus on a character, main characters, secondary characters, follow their individual storylines like this. A story opens. You encounter a character at a particular point in their storyline. Who, where, when, in what condition. We meet the Three Little Pigs when they are just about to be thrown out of their house. Versions vary, different reasons, but they find themselves with a problem. They need to be able to set themselves up with their own houses and live as independent little piggies, ideally staying away from the big bad wolf. As a result, they go on a journey. And by the time we get to the journey, we have been on an ebb, a backward tension thing with a problem, and we're flowing forwards now. On that journey, they meet friends and helpers. That meeting makes them stop. That stop pulls the story up and stops the flow. So it's mapped with a backward barb. When they get their materials, when they build the houses, the story flows forwards because it takes them towards their goal. But then the wolf comes in. That meeting is another backward step. Fast forward to the end of the story, they defeat the wolf and end up, very important to have a clear ending, living together in the brick house and living there happily ever after. And that conventional oral storytelling ending leads you out of the story and into the everyday world, the everyday dimension of being.
I love that. So it's very clear how movement toward the goal, the flow, and then the ebb. And we'll see it as the water pulling away from the shore. The energy is retreating, and we have the problem, the obstacle, the villain or antagonist. Or even, you were saying, even when friends have come together to create, there's a calm point. So it's not always a negative thing. It just be that calm moment as well.
Exactly. Yes. This is one structure of 18 I outline in the book. Each one has a different character. Each one exists because it arrives spontaneously in our consciousness. This is what I found by applying this methodology to the analysis of story structure, because it arises in response to a particular kind of problem we experience in everyday life.
I see. So the different types, you say there's 18, are organized by the type of problem.
Yes.
Lovely. That's great.
Note this and make it much easier for you to see where a story is going in a character's storyline. When you feel that natural pattern, which goes with the grain of the brain, you can plan out if you want to, or you could just flow in the writing because you know where you're going. You're going to travel along very well-oiled tracks.
Absolutely. That's really wonderful. And some of the problems in, let's say, in fantasy tend to be some kind of good versus evil, or some kind of, this is one kingdom versus another, or one way of life versus another. And usually one typically wants to dominate or destroy the other. So you have a story structure for that, I would imagine.
Yes, it's interesting that the story structures that appear in fantasy very often are story structures that are linked with supernatural powers. The quest structure, as I outlined, the story of the three little pigs, is typically found in folk tales or problems that we can solve ourselves. A mathematical proof or an essay, you have a problem, you want to go on a journey, you explore your methodology, you get your points pro, you get your points con, and you get to a conclusion. In a fantasy world, you have supernatural beings who can just take a thunderbolt and send down a lightning bolt, devastate a whole world, as Zeus would in Greek mythology. When a supernatural being acts, typically they don't act in a premeditated way. They act in a spontaneous, reactive way to restore balance in the natural order when they perceived an imbalance. Just like a goddess will intervene when a character is fleeing from someone pursuing them in Greek myths, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, for instance, boom, and there's a transformation, a metamorphosis. Balance is restored, but things never really get back to the state they were in. And that then opens up a whole new situation. You can play with that. Structures that these particular interactions follow are different. The transformation structure, which I've just outlined, is the one that supernatural beings follow in Ovid's Metamorphoses, and it goes bim bam, backwards, forwards, done. Again, knowing that and building up to those kinds of actions, even if you've got a very ordinary character, sometimes in the heat of battle, their ability to act in a very spontaneous, emotionally charged, unusual way, as if possessed by a divine power, will animate that character and make it much more interesting for the reader to follow their storyline. And
yeah, I definitely worked on that in my young adult adventure fantasy series, Henrietta the Dragon Slayer. It was all about her coming into her power, and that power was personified or not or exemplified by the dragon stone that she acquires, and her learning to become okay with this larger than life energy, magic, and learning how to harness it. And I'm working on now a short movie that I hope to turn into a TV show. And same thing, she's learning to harness the power of magic versus just relying on her skills. So I see that has that transformative, larger than life experience. Yeah.
The thing about fantasy is that it builds metaphorically, allegorically, and on powers we have innate within us. The power to, with words, the power to speak and stand our ground, stand up for what we believe in. It takes courage, it takes strength, it takes conviction, and it also is linked to a whole system of learning I have a lot of respect for that comes out of the oral storytelling tradition of the progymnasmata and the classical liberal arts. The arts of grammar, logical and rhetoric, and the number of things that come after that in the quadrivium are integrating and integrative tools for learning.
You'll have to explain a little bit of that. Most of us Americans don't have a classical education. Like I've met many British people who do. And yeah, so explain what was it?
Let's start with the trivium. The three word-based arts of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Logic is the art of working with that which we know. Grammar is working with the art of putting it into words. Rhetoric is the art of communicating it for different purposes. They all work together. Logic helps us clarify our thinking. Grammar helps us convey our thoughts clearly in words. And rhetoric makes those words elegant, suitable for purpose.
And you get to decide what that purpose is.
And if you are clear on your thoughts, if your words are well suited to your purpose, and if you present those words in a very well structured and crafted way, I don't mean just the writing, the editing, the layout, the design, the illustration, the cover image, or you standing up and telling people about your book, reading from your book, if you like, telling the story, then you have a really powerful act of communication that can, as you say, have a positive impact on the world.
That's wonderful. And all that has intention. And I know I'm partway between someone who likes to plan and someone who doesn't like to plan, but I do like to know the direction I'm heading in after I've taken in a lot from the world. I let it all pour into the big pot and stir it up and add in all kinds of things. And then taking my understanding of story and structure and where I'm headed, a safe container, and then sit down and something emerges that I could have never planned, which I just adore. But I recognize I've done all those things and put a lot of attention on them. And then, of course, I spent a lot of editing time and figuring out how to package the book and how to present the book. So I love hearing what you're saying because it represents also the tremendous amount of care and attention that artists put into their work to be able to convey something powerfully. Yeah, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'm very glad to hear you say that because writing is both an art and a craft. One of my books is about the art and craft of writing. It's a collection of writing games designed to encourage writers to have fun, learning the rules of grammar, of logic, of rhetoric, breaking the rules for the right reasons. When that happens, we unlock creativity, we unlock magic, we unlock enchantment that is there inherent in thought itself, in words themselves, in language, and in how we communicate. It ends where mystery, magic, and inspiration take us, a place of silent awe and respect for the wonder that is story.
I love it. So there's a fourth component. What is that?
There are 4 number-based arts that complete the 7 liberal arts. The 4 number-based arts are the study of arithmetic, number, the study of geometry, number in 3 dimensions, the study of music theory and harmony, and the study of astronomy, 3-dimensional bodies in movement. And that animates the cosmos. If you do it traditionally, actually draw shapes. As you draw shapes, you find the inherent energies and patterns within them, the functions of the diagonals, splitting a square in 2 and then expanding it. It's actually very similar to how story works. Geometry gives us an insight into a world of tangible forms which echo an intangible background, which is what we work with as writers. Our words communicate ideas. Those ideas we cannot communicate without the words, but they embody very powerful feelings, thoughts, experiences, which we would be lost if without being able to communicate properly.
I love what you're saying, embody, because emotion is, I feel, conveying emotion and having our audience feel is our job as writers, as storytellers, as novelists. And I love that connection with geometry, which was my favorite math as a teenager. I loved drawing shapes. And I was going to show some of my art. I have a ton of art all over. I've been doing all these circles and spirals and crosshatches and creating 3-dimensional layers with my art and feeling not that I want to create 3-dimensional art, but that I want to create the experience of 3 dimensions, which I realize in our stories is what we're doing when we try to create complex characters that feel real, storylines that feel it's feasible for them to move through and have these encounters and challenges. So let's move to science fiction, because as you started talking about astronomy, I just got a little bit of a jolt. I spend part of my free time watching tons of videos about what the James Webb Space Telescope has seen today, what the Euclid telescope has seen, the latest launches. And I'm also studying orbits. How do orbits work, and understanding movement through space and how this blows my mind. The Earth, we all know the Earth is going around the sun. We all know that all these planets are ringing our sun. We all know that we're part of a solar system, but actually our entire solar system is also making a spiral through space and us along with it. It's a bit dizzying when you start to really feel into that. I didn't know this just in the last few years, as I've been working on science fiction, did I see visualizations of this and just blew my mind that everything is moving, nothing is static, and everything is relative to something else. There is no absolute point in space, which also blows my mind, because everything is relative to everything else. And what does that mean for us as humanity as we attempt to be a spacefaring species? These are things I think about as I work on my science fiction. And so what do you bring with your story structure and your skill set, your tools to us to help us write science fiction better?
Science fiction, to me, is no different to any other genre. You need strong characters. You need a strong philosophical question. That is not my original thought. It's Ben Bovo's, who I have a lot of respect for. Simplifies the approach to science fiction, fantasy writing. And I love that because I work a lot with young writers, as you mentioned at the beginning of the program. They need things to be simplified. It doesn't matter whether you know how the cosmos works, just show it does and show its wonder and the awe for it. I've been reading something about Newton's discoveries recently. He did a lot of meditation, of reading classics, and he worked out his laws of gravity based on what he knew that classical investigators did with strings and weights. Did you know that when you have a string that's maybe kept at attention by a particular weight and you add a weight to it that's 4 times as heavy, the pitch goes up an octave? It doubles in frequency. And this is a simple experiment anyone can do by realizing that and appreciating the fact that as above, so below in the Hermetic axiom. He worked out that planets could very well behave the same way. And then he tested it out empirically, compared speeds, compared masses, compared sizes. And yes, that's how he worked out gravity. But what he also understood or intuited or approached as an idea very positively was that the whole cosmos was a song that can sing you, and you be part of that song if you let yourself do it. If you do, that's when the most powerful writing comes out, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I feel, especially I'm now entering the refining process of the next novel, and I use music tremendous amount, both as an inspiration, but also in helping me make decisions about tone and language and when to cut or when to expand. And I think a lot and research to find music that matches the book, that I can say, this is the song of the book. Because I'm writing murder mystery set in this futuristic setting, it's often asyncopated jazz, and it's often mixed with some African rhythms and maybe some scatting, and it's somewhat familiar, but also new. I invite writers to find the music that matches their work, both from the internal perspective. Maybe each character has their own tune, because they do. Their dialogue needs to sound unique. Each character speaks differently. And one of the ways to figure out the rhythm of their speech, liking it to music. I spend a lot of time on that, especially once the whole story is laid down and the emotional resonance is there, then I'll get really in the weeds, word by word, figuring that out.
Which is why in my book of writing games, I devote a whole chapter to sound and rhythm.
Oh, wonderful. I think it's so important to bring people's attention to that. And as we close, is there any advice that you would like to offer writers as they look at their work to help remake themselves, remake how we could be in the world? Anything about that future-facing look that I bring to this work that I'm inviting you to chime in on?
I think the most important thing for me is to be clear on your stance. By stance, why it is you stand up for whatever message it is you want to communicate. It's the why behind the what that's really important. Very often when we want to put a message out into the world, we focus on the positive. That's generally a good thing to do, but sometimes it's worth considering writing the, oh, so that's what would happen. I don't want to go there story.
Absolutely. And while I'm not someone who reads dystopia or talks in any great length about dystopia, I know that it serves a very powerful purpose in society and helping us look at what we don't want. So absolutely. And every powerful story, even stories that are trying to maybe paint a more positive picture of what could be, we also have to confront the darkness in there to make the story feel real and to have weight. Because even the stories I'm working on, I still have murder. I'm writing murder mysteries. I still have struggles. I still have power plays. I still have things that I don't know if humanity will ever resolve certain things.
Stories don't have to be dystopian to have that quality I'm talking about. Tragedy is very well written about, very well practiced genre. And Aristotle thought it was cathartic. It had a soul cleansing function. Comedy is great. It makes us laugh. Comedy works when we get things to almost a tragic point. And then through the Deus Ex Machina, the magical ending, everything turns out okay. That's when it really works.
Yeah, the catharsis of a good story. Great. Thank you so much, Leon. So if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Very simple, leonconrad.com. Find out about the courses I do, sign up for the mailing list, contact me if you want some help shaping anything to do with story structure. I run weekly drop-in classes, half an hour for writers just playing fun games, getting the art and craft to sizzle and sparkle.
Thank you so much, Leon. And until next time.
Thank you for having me, Beth. Look forward to it.
All right, that's it for this week, everyone. Check out World Building Workbook for Fiction Writers, and that's a free workbook downloadable for you. Great, everyone. So signing off, write long and prosper.